They may be watching you, but I'm watching them. This is Gabriel Custodiet. Just to let you know that the episode you're about to listen to is going to be great, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. If you're new to privacy or looking for a clear vision of next steps, start by going to escapethetechnocracy.com. All our cutting-edge analysis about escaping the surveillance grid occurs exclusively on our paid newsletter, Watchman's Torch, and in our world-class video tutorials. This podcast is just a preview. This is not some game for us. We live this stuff and we consult on it. Your support means we have no sponsors and can speak the unmitigated truth as we see it on this show. Check out the show notes and escapethetechnocracy.com. I'm very pleased to be joined for the second time by Michael Yon. A really enjoyable first conversation, really appreciate his work. I was just chatting with him and then we decided to record. Very short notice, which I like to plan usually in advance, but so just please, audience, excuse my lack of preparation. Obviously, Michael Yon can cover a variety of subjects. So anyway, Michael Yon, welcome back to the Watchman Privacy Podcast. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me on. I'm back in Texas now. And last night I woke up to the most incredible lightning storm, that the sort that I usually only see in Florida. And it was literally lightning for probably an hour. And there was more light than there was dark. Took an amazing time-lapse photography. So I just love storms like that. Anyway, it's great to be back in Texas. I was down in Panama and Argentina and in Japan and other places looking at things that are going on over in Singapore, looking at the Strait of Malacca, and Thailand, looking at the Kra Isthmus. And so now I'm back in incredible Texas.
Michael, by the way, is a global traveler and a reporter, former highly skilled war correspondent, former U.S. Armed Special Forces, Green Beret, an author, and for the last several years, he's been warning about the problems with so-called migration, more accurately called invasion, of third world countries into the first world, and just other kind of geopolitical things that are affecting the West and a lot of the underlying causes. So I've really appreciated listening to him. I just wanted to start with this question, Michael, because you're really far down the rabbit hole in terms of understanding these things. One of the things, maybe the benefit of not having prepared for this particular discussion, is I'm speaking more from an amateur kind of voice, the average person who might be listening. And one of the things you talk about is China's plans to conquer the West. And so I would say a lot of people, maybe they don't see that. They don't think that China has plans to take over the West. If you could put yourself into some of these shoes of these people, why are you so convinced that China clearly has designs upon the West? And when did you come to that conclusion?
Oh, it's kind of easy to come to that conclusion because they say it all the time. And keep in mind, I spent almost 20 years in Asia. A lot of that time was in China and also around China in places like Taiwan, Japan, of course, about 25 countries just in Asia, right? And so just in Asia alone, I've spent most of my life in other countries watching how things are unfolding and reading huge amounts of books and going to wars and all sorts of things. So you pick up a lot of different sets of knowledge along the way, and listening to the Chinese and what they're saying and what they're physically doing, they do match up. They're very clear that they plan to knock the United States out and basically knock us in the head and take the land. They're very clear about it. They don't hide it. They're not the only ones. So it's a multiplayer game. It's not like just China versus United States, but it's China versus the world. And then there's other, when I had Brett Weinstein down in the Darien Gap in the jungle in Panama, he said that he mentioned to me that I often say they are doing this, they are doing that. He said, he asked a very smart question: who is they? And of course, they is a multiplayer game. Like, who runs the jungle? Who runs this thing? Nobody really. It's the jungle. Like, look at let's say the war between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine and Russia, obviously, it's an inverted world war. There's many countries that are involved. When I say inverted world war, there's World War I and World War II. Those are the world wars that we look at as the world wars. But there's actually been quite a lot of world wars. They just weren't on that scale. And sometimes they're inverted. Like, let's say the Iraq War. Over 40 countries showed up to fight in Iraq, right? Over 40, right? And that doesn't include the neighbors who were involved in various ways. So it was inverted. So the war wasn't being fought all over the world, not openly anyway, but it was being fought like in one parking lot, let's say. Similar with Afghanistan, right? So it's like an inverted world war. What we have going on here with Ukraine and Russia is not just Ukraine and Russia. It's absolutely global. I mean, it has direct implications with what's going on, for instance, in Gaza and potential war with Iran and the Panama issue. And these are all related. They're not separate. And it takes years of study. You're not going to read Foreign Affairs and subscribe to that and a few other newspapers and whatnot and read them for a few years and understand this. You're just not going to. There's no chance. I mean, it takes years. It takes years of going around and physically looking at places, talking with the right people. But it's always a work in process. It's like the study of medicine or something. You're never going to get to the bottom of it. But what we can see in general terms is that these greater wars, typically the huge ones, are bankers' wars. And also, it's about routes and resources, right? So China is very clear with their Belt and Road Initiative. They built a railway that goes all the way from Shanghai. I've been to that side of it, and it goes all the way to Rotterdam. All the way across Asia and Europe. I've been to the Rotterdam side as well. And they're building a train down through Thailand now. They've made a lot of progress, which has already cost huge numbers of Thai businesses and jobs, because as people order their products on Temu, this app, right, from China, they just put them on the train and they come straight down from China to Thailand, which knocks Thai businesses out of business. But these different routes that are being built by rail and by ship, by canals, by seaways and that sort of thing, gathering ports and creating ports. It's all part of a larger architecture, which is why, again, I spend so much time in Panama. After Biden was installed, I spent more than a year in Panama in the last 4 years. And before that, it had been years since I was in Panama. But as soon as Biden was installed, I was at the inauguration. I didn't go to the, near the stage. I was just in Washington, D.C., watching how quickly they could build walls in Washington, D.C., but not on the border, right? So I left the inauguration and flew straight to El Paso, Texas, which is a major crossing point. So I was there within about 24 hours after the inauguration, and the border was being flooded. So then I flew down with Chuck Holton and Masako Ganaha to Colombia, to that side of the Darien Gap, Colombia, where they pass through the jungle there and go to Panama on their way to the United States. So, and I was looking at the invasion there with Chuck Holton and Masako Ganaha. It was quite serious. Then we went up to the Panama side in the Darien Gap, and I brought many people down. At this point, I brought about 70 people down, about 6 dozen, right? But congressmen and Epoch Times, Brett Weinstein, the whole works. Ann Vandersteel, of course. Masako Ganaha has been there probably 15 times. So I've taken a lot of people there and put that on the map, realizing that Panama would end up, partly because of the invasions and partly because somebody was going to go for the canal, would end up being a big focus. And it has become so. But now, once Trump has said he's waved his magic wand and allegedly vanquished China from Panama, Americans went right back to sleep on that. I'm back in the United States, and people are like, yeah, Trump took care of Panama. I'm like, no, he didn't. He said a few things, but the momentum is still clearly on China's side. Clearly, like, obviously. I've spent, again, more than a year there since Biden was installed. I just spent, my last trip alone was 5 months. I just flew from Panama City to Austin, actually. And so you can go down there and see for yourself. I mean, if you're in the United States, you can be to Panama tomorrow easily. Just go to the airport and fly down to Panama City. And you can go and look for yourself and start rummaging around, and you'll see the Chinese are working on that fourth bridge over the canal. And it's right beside the Hutchison port that Chinese operates there, that BlackRock is trying to get, but China's not just handing that over. And there's 2 ports. There's 7 ports in the canal, but there's 2 ports run by Hutchison, which is the Chinese. And the canal itself is operated by the Panamanians. It's not operated by the Chinese, but those 2 key ports are operated by the Chinese. And those ports are on the Hutchison ports are on the Atlantic side is one, and on the other side is on the Pacific side is the other. And so those two ports are connected by a railway, right? It's a short railway, roughly 50 miles. I've taken that train. It doesn't do passenger service anymore, but we scored a trip one day, Masako and I. They actually let us ride in the engineer car and actually let us put a camera on top of the locomotive, believe it or not. And so we went across, Panama on that. It's an intercontinental railway, like 50 miles long. And but that railway connects those two ports on each side of the Panama Canal. So it connects those two Chinese operated ports. This is really important. It's really important because ships can come to the Pacific or Atlantic side, offload a bunch of cargo at those ports, and ship it back and forth by train without the ships having to go through the canal, right? So Maersk just bought that, a Danish company, about maybe 2 months ago now, and roughly, and they bought the railway, but the ports are still in control of the Chinese, and I don't see any end in sight. The Chinese clearly are working hard to connect Colombia and Panama with a train, with a road right now, and eventually with a train. I mean, they've already got a book about it, right? So again, this isn't conspiracy theory or anything. They published a book about it in Spanish and English. I've read it. In fact, I've got it here. So I mean, it's not. It's conspiracy theory to people that really are, let's say, uneducated, right? I mean, with China and their Belt and Road Initiative, you see the big fight now over Gaza. That's not about October 7th. That's about the gas off of Gaza, the Suez Canal, building the Ben Gurion Canal, and having control over the Indo-European corridor and some other things, right? But it's not about October 7th. That's just casus belli. That was a green flag, stake goat attack is what those are called, where it was, clearly staged. About 1,000 people died, really actually died. And, but it was actually obviously a staged fight to create casus belli, to take that land of Gaza, so that ultimately you can take also the Suez Canal. Of the 7 major choke points in the world, naval choke points in the world, the most important in the world for the United States is Panama by far, right? But the most important in the world for most people would be would be Suez. But so Suez and Panama are up there, incredibly important, as is Strait of Malacca, of course, and Bab el-Mandeb, Strait of Hormuz, Danish Straits, and Strait of Gibraltar, Turkish Straits. There's a few there that are really, you don't want these interrupted. You can do workarounds on some, but for instance, if we lose the Panama Canal, we gave it away. By the way, a lot of people talk about, we return the Panama Canal to the Panamanians. That's just nonsense. Panama Canal never belonged to the Panamanians. We created Panama on November 3rd, 1903. We cleaved off a part of Colombia in a revolution. We sponsored a revolution and made the Republic of Panama on November 3rd, 1903, specifically and openly so we could make the canal. So we created Panama, the Republic of Panama, cleaved it off of Colombia, made the Republic of Panama, immediately made an agreement with Panama that we would have a 10-mile swathe of land through Panama, 5 miles on each side of the canal, so 10 miles. And that would be American property so that we could create and operate the canal. And we did, right? And so Panama, did quite well over the years. And eventually through information war and bankers wars and other things that you might want to read about in The Creature from Jekyll Island is a great book. And also another one called The Path Between the Seas is great, about the creation of the Panama Canal, the path between the seas. You can see some of these components about how this unfolded. But we created Panama Canal so that we could, operate it and own it, right? And then, Chinese and others using the United Nations, I want to be very clear about that, using the United Nations, waged a huge information war. Eventually, Jimmy Carter and others gave the canal to Panama, but this is a farce. This is a shell game. In reality, they gave it to Panama. Of course, they said returned it to Panama, which is nonsense. And so that they can take it from Panama, right? It's the same as happening, and very similar is happening now with Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. Diego Garcia has a strategic base. It would be strategic for anybody that has it, such as China. And so China is now using the United Nations to take Diego Garcia from United Kingdom, from Great Britain, whatever you want to call it, and give it to Mauritius, and to give Diego Garcia to Mauritius. But if Diego Garcia goes to Mauritius, China is going to take it from Mauritius. That's what happened with the Panama Canal. We give it to the Panamanians, give it back, quote unquote, which they never owned. It was never theirs until we gave it to them for $1. And then eventually now it's out there alone. This is why you see, like, for instance, up in Canada, Trudeau, the boy wonder, not giving away, but let's say, anointing sovereignty to some of the Indian islands, some of the indigenous islands, which is fine. Whatever, do what you're going to do. But I know what is really going on here. What's really happening is those islands, China will end up taking them. That's what'll happen. Now, in the interim, nobody can argue with, yes, the indigenous people should have their land. And yeah, we all get it. But let me tell you, this is big boy stuff. This isn't dreamland. Let's all smoke dope and live in peace. This is war, right? This is straight up war. Same with Hawaii. Someone was going to take Hawaii, period. Someone was going to get it. It was going to be China or Russia or Germany, or somebody was going to take Hawaii. We took it. It would have been somebody else. The Hawaiians were not going to keep it, period, right? Likewise, the Hawaiians that are there now took them from people that were there before. They conquered the islands from people that were there before, right? So when you live on a pork chop, a big juicy pork chop, and you don't have an army to defend it and a bunch of friends to defend it, you will lose that pork chop, right? This is why, you see countries like Poland. Poland will always know war. I lived in Poland for 2 years, by the way. But Poland will always know war because Poland is on a route for war. It's a nice flat land to invade through. It's between Asia and Europe. And it's just, Poland will see war after war after war. It's just, if you live in Hawaii, people are always going to fight over taking Hawaii because it's strategic. Panama. I tell the Panamanian government now, and Panamanians, the higher level ones, listen, whatever decisions you make now, they better be wise. You better really think them through, non-emotionally. You better think them through, think long and think hard and study before making decisions, because the decisions that you make now, your life depends on it. And I mean your life. And you're not going to keep Panama as some sovereign place where you're Switzerland and you don't have to engage in the wider world. You're sitting on a pork chop that was created by the United States. By the way, the Spaniards first came there, of course, about 530 years ago, 520 years ago or so, something like that. And so they obviously were colonists, and then there were others along the way. The United States never colonized Panama, by the way. We're often called colonizers there, but we never did. We created Panama and then kept the Panama Canal, but we didn't colonize Panama. That's the people that are saying that we colonized Panama are typically the communist colonizers, right? And they're typically actually, speaking Spanish, saying you've colonized us and it's white privilege and yada, yada, yada. I'm like, you're whiter than I am. You're European. You're from Spanish descent. You are from conquistador. You're a conquistador, right? You took the land from the Indians, from the 7 tribes in Panama, right? Well, actually, you were here, and then it was, the Bolivar thing, and it was very complex 500 years of history, or 400 years at that point. And then we came through and created Panama from, lands that you had conquered from the Indians, and we built a canal. And there's many sorts of people that live in Panama, by the way. It's almost like a Latin New York. I mean, there's so many different sorts of people. But what I'm getting to with that soliloquy is that it's complex and nobody owns it unless you've got guns. Bottom line, you either got guns or you got big friends with guns who see it as in their best interest to defend it. Because if it's China, they're going to genocide you. That's how it's going to play out. They're going to enslave and genocide you. That's how they roll. I spent almost 20 years in Asia. I've been up to Tibet. I was in Hong Kong when China took it over. Taiwan's in the news again today. I was there again last year looking at it quite a lot. China doesn't play games. They play law of the jungle. This is, when the gazelle gets born, it better be able to run, right? They're not gonna give you any breaks because you're weak. You're just tender meat, right? And that's how China's going to roll. So the decisions that countries like Panama make now will affect them, and it's existential. But keep in mind, this is part of a global architecture, right? So they're not any, they're basically a little boat on a big rough sea. They don't control the weather. They don't control the sea. They only can control what they can control, which is what's on their little boat and how they decide to operate their boat and where they decide to steer their nose of their boat. And, and how much they decide to communicate and how they communicate will affect their survival.
A bunch of things I could ask you. You've covered things on other shows, so maybe I'll try something that you haven't talked about as much. I know you read a book recently called Hijacking Bitcoin. Just your thoughts as a very strategic thinker, able to analyze situations, bizarre situations that are more than they appear to be. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
That's like saying, what are your thoughts on Zionism? The people's blood pressure is ready to explode the moment you mention Bitcoin, right?
Even better.
Because it's a very emotional topic, which should be a clue right there. That should be a major clue. That it is an emotional topic is a major clue about what's going on, right? And have you ever read The Madness of Crowds? It came out in 1841. I'm not talking about the crowd. I read that too. That came out in about 1890, I think. And then there's another one more recently by, I read that one too. But
Douglas Murray.
Yeah. I read that one, but that wasn't like, you got to read
the original one. Was that from like the 50s? Maybe?
No, 1841. And
okay.
From McKay. It's called the crowd is from 1890. That's from Le Bon, Gustave, right? Gustave Le Bon. I read that one. Very good book, worth it. And then there's The Madness of Crowds. That is that's
Charles McKay.
Charles McKay. Yeah, that's all right. And that's from 1841. That's a brilliant piece right there, man. If you read that book, it's interesting. Now, if you read I bought that book I just checked the other day. I bought it in April of 2020. The Madness of Crowds, the 1841 book. I bought it in April of 2020. And which is interesting because rewind the tapes, that's when the stampede was going on the COVID thing and everybody's got to get the jabs, right? So that's when I went back through that book again. I went back and I read Gustav's 1890 or 91 book as well on, the crowd, which is fascinating. And now I read the Douglas Murray book whenever that came out. I read a bunch of books on crowd behavior at that point because I wanted to understand the herd better because we are herd people, right? And so what's interesting, I'm going to the Bitcoin thing. If you go to the book, the 1841 book by Charles McKay, and you can find it online, I would highly suggest reading it. But he talks about the 1700s as an example. He talks about these bubbles. And there was another guy in 1720. What was his name? His name was Bowles, Thomas Bowles. If I'm right, Bowles. I'm sorry, my memory's not good. It was like 1720. And Thomas Bowles used to make playing cards, like cards that people play poker with and stuff, because a lot of people, play poker still then and still today, right? So they would put things on these cards, like, maps of cities in England or something would be like 52 cards with maps, stuff like that, right? And one of the sets of 52 cards was from 1720, and it's called the bubbles, I think. Isn't it called the bubbles? The bubbles or the bubble cards, something like that. But if you look up 1720, Thomas Bowles, Bowles, and you look up the bubbles, you'll see these playing cards. And he's got 52 different bubbles because there's 52 cards, 52 different financial bubbles, like the South Sea bubble, right? And I don't think he has the Tulip Mania in there, which was 36 or something. I don't remember, man. My memory's getting bad. I need more sleep. But I think that tulip mania in Netherlands was fascinating. And yeah, do you know about tulip mania that occurred in the 1600s, or have you heard of that? Or
Yeah, where these tulips were being sold for just ridiculous prices that had no connection with reality or their inherent value, however you want to define that.
that's right. And then also this happened. Oh gosh, I mean the bubbles cards, man, they're fascinating. You got to look at them. If you go to the Christie's auction, I went on there and I found some photos of them on the Christie's auction site in maybe Southby's. You can find them, and you can see all these 52 different bubbles. Now, keep in mind these financial bubbles; those cards were made in 1720, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's like 1820, 1920, 2020. That's 305 years ago when he made those cards, right? 305 years ago, and his 52 playing cards has 52 different bubbles. If there was 100 playing cards, he would have had 100 bubbles. But if you look at the cards, like the South Sea bubble, which is one of the most famous bubbles out there. Oftentimes I hear people say the South Sea bubble was the original, I don't know, stock market crash ever or whatever, something like that. Basically the original huge scam. But that's just not true at all. There was the tulip mania, and there's many, many more. But what I'm getting to is if you look at those cards, he's doing satire about the people who fall for it and how they're like taking loans out to buy stock in South Seas or whatever, taking care of orphans and all kinds of things, or different bubbles that are there. And they all just end in the same way. But keep in mind, that was 1720, and he had 52 cards with 52 different bubbles. Bubbles happen so quickly around us. It's like if you go and you're boiling water in a big pot and you look at all the bubbles coming off the bottom of the pot, you can't keep track of that. You know what I mean? There's always a new one too. That's the way it is in real life. We're surrounded by bubbles. It's just that most of them aren't big enough to get your attention. They're maybe local somewhere in some other country or in another state, or you didn't invest in it, you didn't pay attention. But in reality, there's thousands and thousands of these things, and you are always walking in a jungle, in a minefield, right? So you have to be. That's why it's important to read books like the Madness of Crowds from 1841. That's why it's important to read Gustave Le Bon and The Crowd and those sorts of things. And Rape of the Mind is a good book from 1956 from Juste Merlot. It's a fantastic book. And you start to see these patterns. What I'm getting to with all this, you're asking me about Bitcoin. To me, it's like I first got Bitcoin in 2013. Somebody donated some, but since then, I've traded in it back and forth. To me, it's a tulip. It's a tulip mania. It's been useful at times. It's very useful. But first of all, they sold it on the idea in the beginning that, hey, we're going to get away from central banks and it's untrackable. Well, we know it's highly trackable now. We know that part was a grand fraud. It was obviously designed to be tracked, right? It's more trackable than your credit card. I mean, at least your credit card, you have to, have access to some institutional, computer system or intelligence in computer system. But if you want to track Bitcoin, some dude in China can track your transactions with Bitcoin, for some random guy in Texas. I mean, this is child's play, right? So, I mean, that's a complete fraud. And who actually invented Bitcoin? Some mysterious alien, with a Japanese name. Okay, whatever. I mean, you have to suspend this anytime you find yourself in an emotional state and people get angry and they're starting to get wild about it. This is the bubble cards, from 1720. This is tulip mania. This is the South Sea bubble. This is thousands and thousands of others that people were so convinced about. There are some monies that hold their value across space and time, and one of them is gold. I mean, period. And silver. That's why the Spaniards were running all over the place, and not just them, but the Spaniards, when they were, doing their big explorations in South America, Central America, Mexico, United States, or America back then, it wasn't United States. And, but they were, the power of gold. I mean, they would sail around and you see a river mouth, there's where the Indians are. And, Are they wearing gold and silver? Yes. Okay, let's go up this river. Start, where are the gold mines, right? The gold mine is somewhere off of this river, and some tribe somewhere is going to know where they're getting the gold from, whether it's panning for it or mining for it or something. And so that's why when you go around the world, like Panama, and you see these old Spanish forts, centuries old, in decay, but they're at the mouths of these rivers that they were controlling because they were controlling the gold and silver trade. The gold and the silver are part of our cultural firmware. You go to Thailand, again, I lived in Asia for like 20 years, right? About 19 years. And you will go to a place like China where gold is like, common usage, right? You go to Vietnam, same thing. Laos, same thing. Myanmar, same thing. You go to India, same thing. You go to Thailand, the baht, their currency is called the baht. That's obviously liquid. But honey, the gold flows almost like liquid. The gold in Thailand flows kind of like honey. If the baht, fiat money flows like water, gold in Thailand flows like honey. It's still, if you got gold in your pocket, you will have no problem transmuting that over to fiat or something else. It's like if you're in Thailand right now listening to this, and you ask a waitress or a waiter at a restaurant, what's the gold price today? I've done this a lot. I've been all over Thailand. Most of them will either know off the top of their head, or they'll say, "Oh, I haven't checked in a week or two." I think it's whatever. They actually are so tuned in to gold. Now, keep in mind, in some countries like Japan, gold used to be as important as it was in China. But the Japanese have been subject to the same information wars that Americans have been subjected to. And when I was growing up, it was virtuous to have a savings account and put your fiat into the savings account, right? We weren't taught about gold. I mean, some people were, the lucky people were, but most people, because the information war had changed, the cultural firmware that we had, that real money is things like gold, that people around the world accept for thousands of years. Sorry, I need a sip of water. Sorry. But you see, but in Japan, Japanese think it's still very virtuous to save, which it is, but they save in fiat. Like most Japanese have no relation with gold anymore, right? And Dutch are the same way. A lot of the Dutch, I've talked about gold a lot with Dutch people when I'm in Netherlands, and as educated as they are, and their ancestors were highly educated on things like gold and silver, but not now, because in the information war, that's been washed out of their minds. And now people are going from fiat to ultra super fiat, like Bitcoin. That's why I call it tulip coin. Again, it's useful. I've used Bitcoin quite a lot, but it's like I've used bridges a lot that I know one day are going to be blown out by the floods. You know what I mean? It's like, and I use fiat a lot. We all use fiat, but eventually fiat will find its level of worth, which is the paper it's written on, right? And it's the same with Bitcoin. Eventually, it to me, it looks like a massive scam. If you look back at the 1720s bubble cards, by Thomas Bowles, you'll see he could have predicted Bitcoin. That guy in 1720 with his playing cards. I wish he were alive today to see this. He would just laugh and make a 53rd card, I'm sure.
Yeah, even as somebody who understands a bit about Bitcoin and has some Bitcoin friends, it's clearly the price that is connected with it is clearly vastly exceeds its actual usefulness, right? Whatever that is. It is quite ridiculous. A little bit of another different question here, Michael, kind of out of the blue. There's maybe not so much of a connection between some of these questions. You are conversant in German. I'm just curious. You travel around the world. How far does German get you internationally?
Weirdly, this is really weird. Like when I went to the Army language school for German and another one for Polish, but I don't speak Polish well at all. But then I lived in Germany for about 4 years, and then I lived in Poland for about 2 years. And believe it or not, I spoke German in Poland a lot. And most of the people I dealt with either spoke either English or German. A lot of them spoke Russian too at that time. So, I was using it a lot in Poland, used it a lot in Germany, of course. But then, like, for instance, when I was with the Kurds in Iraq, a lot of the Kurds speak German fluently. So I spoke German with Kurds all the time. Believe it or not, I've used German in Nepal quite a lot. Like, I hired a guide up there. I spent about a year in Nepal. I'm going to go back this year, actually. And then he spoke German better than he spoke English. So I spent, I don't know, months with that guy walking up the Mount Everest and all over the place. And so his German was quite good. And then also in Afghanistan, believe it or not, again, I was out on this remote airstrip one day. This guy's got the long beard and the turban. I'm waiting on an airplane. This is a gravel runway, actually. And I walked up to him and asked if he spoke English. And he said no. And I said, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" And he's like, "Yeah, ich spreche Deutsch." He's like, "Yeah, I speak
Wow.
German." And then we talked for a long time. I said, "Wo haben Sie Deutsch gelernt?" And he's like, "I learned in Berlin." And I said, "Where'd you get your iPhone? Does it work here?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I got the iPhone in Dubai." And his German was completely fluent. This guy looked like, he looked like Osama bin Laden. You know what I mean? But this is what's weird. There are actually a lot of people around. If you're out in some crazy place and you speak Spanish and you try English, but you don't try Spanish, you might be surprised how many people speak Spanish. You know what I mean? You might be out in Nepal and not even think to try Spanish or German because you'll just assume that they don't. But
Right.
you should try every language that you know, and you would be surprised how many hits you get. There'll be some random guy like, how did you learn to speak German out in this village in Nepal? And be like, oh, my dad was such and such, and then I, went to school in Berlin. So it just never ends.
Going back to China here, Michael, one of the reasons why China is maybe able to evade some of the detection of its activities is that it's pretty locked down when it comes to people going to China and, let's say, investigating, see what sorts of things are going on. Right there's a whole. I know plenty of people or I know some people who don't even think the Uyghur genocide, like, if that's even a thing. Right, so there's a lot of cover up that goes on in China. I believe you have spent time actually in China in the past. I think if I remember correctly, you're not so much welcome there anymore. When you were in China, what did you detect? Are you still not welcome in China? And what do you make of just China's ability to kind of cover up the things that are happening within its own borders?
Well, yeah, I've been many places in China, and I got kicked out of Hong Kong, and it's doubtful that I'd be welcome in China when I've written 3 books on Chinese information war. The last time I was in mainland China, I went to Nanjing and Shanghai and Beijing and I don't know, a few other places, and Kunming, stuff like that. Just kind of places a lot of people go. And I was researching and information war, actually. But the Chinese are very good at covering up information. They're very good at shaping narratives. They're actually quite good at information war. Who's bad at information war but good at almost everything else is Japanese. Japanese I've told people in the Japanese government, I'm like, wow, Japan is so good at so many things except for information war. It's like, that's because they're so honest, and Chinese have no problem with that. Interestingly, who else is in the past, at least, was very good at information war the English, right? They were very good at it. But now they seem to have just used it on themselves, like the United States. The United States became very good at information war and now uses it on our own people. It's like nuking our own people with the information war. But the Japanese have never been good at that. But the Chinese, and I could go on for hours about this, and the old authors talking about this in the 30s and before, literally talking about this, like how the Japanese are literally what I was just saying is almost right out of some of these 1930s books. And one of them is called, oh, good Lord, I've forgotten the name of it. I think it was from 1938, but it was a journalist that was over in China, and he was going on about how Americans, they tend to trust Japanese a great deal because the Japanese, culturally, they tend to be very honest, right? If you had the bell curve, they would be like 3 deviations into the honesty side, right? You know what I mean? and but the Chinese would be like 3 deviations to the other side, right? And he didn't use those mathematical terms, but he went on to say that we tend to believe the Japanese. We don't believe the Chinese on anything unless they're talking bad about Japanese. Then Americans, despite that, even back then, we always got along with Japanese, except during World War II. I mean, Americans got along with Japanese swell, except World War II, right? And but this author from, again, I think it was 1938, and he talked about how we don't believe the Chinese until they're talking bad about Japanese, and we just take them at face value. Despite our lying eyes, that the Japanese are, basically, out of all the countries I've been in the world, and so many cultures I've been with, I've been to 99 countries. I spent most of my life out of the United States, right? And Japanese are by far the most, I feel the most comfortable around Japanese. I mean, when it comes to, other than my own people, right? And because the Japanese, I just don't feel like I'm about to get stabbed in the back every day. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? They're far more trustworthy. However, they have been subject to the same levels of information war that we have. And so, and Japanese are humans and can be brainwashed like everybody else, and have been, like, for instance, back to gold. Japanese, they don't, the average Japanese is alien to gold. They probably never touched it except for maybe a gold necklace or something like that. They will not have touched a 1 ounce gold coin or something like that. And which is really interesting, because you just fly over to Thailand, which is, you can easily fly there from Japan. And there's more gold stores than there are coffee shops, and banks combined. I mean, there's gold. If you're in Thailand now, just whatever town you're in, just drive around and see how many gold stores you see in the front in 1 hour. Well, do it, when it's not, rush hour in Bangkok. You're going to see so many gold stores. Once you start paying attention to it, they are everywhere. So I mean, that's why a lot of Thais, they wear gold jewelry, which is really just as like one of my Thai friends, she's of Chinese descent. She said, an old Chinese saying, she said, she's a businesswoman in Thailand. She said that in Chinese, they say, big brother has gold, little brother has cash. Little brother has cash. And so, but a lot of Thais, like one time she said when she was younger, she was up in Chiang Mai, northern Thailand, and she ran out of money because she was young and, did what young people did. Don't pay attention to your money. But that's why she wore this gold ring. It wasn't for decoration. It was in case of something like that. Just took it to a gold store, cashed it in, flew home, right? That was her insurance policy. So there's a lot of Thais. They have necklaces that are made so that you can take off a link of the necklace and sell it, and then put the necklace right back on. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit shorter. Because that's how liquid gold is over there.
You kind of touched on, Japan is in one sense geographically near China, right? But there's a huge gap between these types of people. And that's one of the things that you talk about, and kind of one of the themes of why we don't want just mass migration, if we want to call it that, is because people are just like, you don't just want to mix groups of people together. It seems, I mean, if we just step back, it seems pretty obvious. I was recently in Turkey, and I was surprised to discover that people there talking about how they hate immigration. And I've heard friends and people on the team recently in Latin America where they say, yeah, even a country, whether that's Colombia and Venezuela, even people who are that close and going into one country or another, there's still tension in those situations. Why are these giant migrant waves being pushed so hard, despite the fact that nobody really seems to want this? What's kind of the big picture thing going on here?
Oh, it's clear. I mean, again, it's not hidden. It's one of those things that's not hidden in plain sight. It's not hidden in plain sight. It is not hidden, and it's in plain sight. There are numerous species of globalists who just want to destroy borders, for starters, because they want to have no borders and no obstacles between their routes and resources. Again, going back to routes and resources. Why would you want to deal with Panamanians to deal with the Panama Canal if you're Chinese? You're not going to deal with Panamanians. You're going to deal with them long enough to be done with them, right? When you've got all kinds of minerals and rivers that emanate from Tibet, you're not going to go up there and deal with the Dalai Lama. You're going to get rid of them, right? And it's just like, if Comanches are on oil country in Texas, people are going to come try to take that oil country. And this is the law of the jungle here. This is again, if you're a lamb wearing pork chops around your neck, you better be a lamb with guns, and you better have the ability to defend yourself. So, likewise, China is expanding, as are, many of these globalists they have no loyalties to any country. They have no loyalties to any flag. They are tribal old families or structures. And they're, and then there's different species of them. They're not all the same. For instance, there's the Chinese Communist Party that wants the world to be Han Chinese. They want everybody to speak Mandarin. They want them to speak a certain class of Mandarin. They want them to be, they want them to know a certain history, to be, to everybody be on the same sheet of music, and their own national myth of racial superiority and that sort of thing. And they want the world to be Han Chinese. So they want to do a genocide. That's the Chinese, right? Then you've got people like Soros. I can't read that crazy man's mind, but he's just one of many. He's not, a lot of people will hang everything on Soros, like Soros this, Soros that. Yeah, he's important. He's one of the enemy camp. But if he was gone tomorrow, this would continue, because there's others. For instance, one example would be highest.org, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, right? Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society is actually one of the main engines that pumps huge amounts of Islamic fighters into the United States and Europe. Recently, my friend Todd Bensman, he published an article about a guy that came from Mauritania, Africa, and he was shot up a Jewish guy screaming Allahu Akbar, right? So this guy from Mauritania, Africa, shot up this Jewish guy screaming Allahu Akbar, and ends up in prison, and somehow magically died in prison. And so when my friend Todd Bensman published the guy's name, I checked it on a database I have to see if he came through the Darien Gap, this guy from Mauritania, right? So I checked his name. There it was. Bingo. So he came through Darien Gap on January 2nd, 2023. He came through on January 2nd, 2023. That means Highest helped him absolute minimum twice. He would not be on that list unless Highest had helped him absolute minimum twice, but probably multiple more times. That means Highest, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, of which Alejandro Mayorkas was a board member. Alejandro Mayorkas was the child of Sephardic Jews from Cuba who immigrated to the United States. He became a board member on the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and then he became the Department of Homeland Security chief, overseeing the invasion operations of the United States, right? So if you go to highest.org, HAIS.org, you go to HAIS.org, highest.org, and look at the donors. You'll see the donors, many Shapiros and Pritzkers and all that sort of thing. You'll see a letter of congratulations to Alejandro Mayorkas from getting basically promoted from as a board member from Highest, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, over to being the Department of Homeland Security chief. He came down to Panama. I was physically present when he came. And Mayorkas came down to Panama. He came to Darien. He came to the San Vicente camp, which I've been to, 100 times. I've been to that camp a lot, right? And when I heard that he was coming, I waited for 4 days. He landed right there, 4 Black Hawk helicopters. The Southcom commander, Laura Richardson, was there. U.S. Ambassador Aponte was there. Mayorkas was there. And I was there. And there he was, right next there. Highest was there. Of course, he was Highest. He was Highest that was inserted into the Department of Homeland Security. And so why is Highest inserting jihadists into the United States? When I gave a speech last year in Texas, and I said, you're going to have people who were funded with Jewish money through Highest, who are going to end up on golf courses in West Palm Beach screaming Allahu Akbar, shooting Jews on the golf course, and they will have been helped by Highest, by Jewish money. Reconcile this for me. You know what I mean? Because my crystal ball is not clear enough to understand why this would happen or be allowed to happen. When I called out Ben Shapiro, there's a Ben Shapiro on that donor list. I don't know if it's him or not, but when I called him out, he'll never say a bad word about, Ben Shapiro, that fast talking guy that pushed the death jabs on Daily Wire, that guy. He'll never say a bad word about Hias. Why? Hias is clearly helping to invade the United States, as is Catholic Charities, Lutheran Services, Red Cross, Norwegian Refugee Council, of course, the United Nations. United Nations, if we're not defunding the United Nations, we're not even serious about any of this, right? That's why I keep telling. I was on a Zoom call about 2 weeks ago with the House Oversight Committee. Marjorie Taylor Greene's people were on, and that sort of thing. Some Doge people. She's involved in the Doge thing, and they were. So this is mid-May 2025, right? Is when this call about 2 weeks ago, mid-May 2025. And they were just discussing if they should plan to defund the NGOs that are causing it. I'm just like, how long has it been since the inauguration? And I was publishing before the inauguration. The first things that Trump should do is release the January 6 people, do a few more things like that are very important and you can do within 30 minutes, right? Sign a bunch of documents, say it loud, say it clear, start making it happen, right? And then immediately that day or the next morning over coffee, defund the United Nations. Go for it, right? And if we don't defund the United Nations and all these NGOs, then you're just not serious. But on this House oversight, and this is now we're almost in June and of 2025. We're in late May now, and there's been no move to defund the United Nations. And meantime, when I was on this House Oversight Committee call about 2 weeks ago, let me get a sip of water here. One of the guys on the call, he said something to the effect of, I don't think we should defund the faith-based charities like Catholic Charities, Hias, Lutheran Services. And, at that point, I was just starting to be quiet because it's such a clown show to listen to these people. And these are serious decision makers. They're in serious gatekeeping positions, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so you're saying we shouldn't defund faith-based organizations. So I'm thinking not that includes people like Catholic Charities, Hias, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. These are all faith-based organizations that are working hard to destroy the United States and Europe and Japan. Catholic Charities, Hias, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they're all the same. They are the same, right? The guy that came across and shot the Jew yelling Allahu Akbar, I was the one warning about that before it happened. And then I get called anti-Semite. You see how those clowns operate? It's the magic wand of professional victims. Professional victims are always predators. I've never seen an exception to that. You see the Chinese Communist Party, always professional victims, right? Because they're predators. And Hias is a predator, right? And they are literally pulling people into the United States who obviously are going to kill Jews and already are. And then they're going to claim victimhood after they brought them in, right? This is not only professional victimhood, this is creating the martyrs, so that you have casus belli like October 7th, right? The staked goat attack on October 7th was the clearest fraud of an attack I've seen since a long time, right? The October 7th attack was obviously real. A lot of people were killed. But look how long it took for the ultra super soldiers of the IDF to respond. And, the super duper Mossad, who's supposed to be smarter than everybody but God, they didn't see it coming. Okay, so this equation doesn't reconcile. Either they're not that competent or they are and they let it happen. If they're not that competent, they can't tie their shoes. But after that attack started on October 7th, it took 7 or 8 hours, a full McDonald's shift to get the IDF into serious action. It took 7 or 8 hours to get the Israeli Defense Forces slinging serious lead against the people that were massacring the partygoers on October 7th. Keep in mind, I've done a lot of combat. I've done a shit ton of combat, including a lot of QRF stuff. quick reaction force, right? How long does it take to get a cold Black Hawk? Israel has Black Hawks. How long does it take to get a cold Black Hawk off the ground? Not hawk-cocked or anything like that. Just a cold Black Hawk. 4 minutes. 4 minutes. They go 180 knots. Your QRF should have been wheels up in 4 minutes. If it took 5 or 6 minutes, if it took 6 minutes to get wheels up, I would be firing one of the commanders, right? I mean, seriously, you should have been in action within 20, 30 minutes max. You should have been slinging lead. Now, I've said that before, and some people say, you don't understand. They have to make a plan. I'm like, be quiet. I've done a lot of combat. This is how it operates. Gunfire, our people are getting killed. Get us over there. Where are they shooting at? Put us down right there. Get it. Get it, boys. You know what I'm saying? If some of us get killed, bring more, right? If our helicopter gets shot down, bring more, right? Come in, planes, trains, bicycles, ride your German Shepherd, ride your child's tricycle, grab your rifle and go to where the fighting is and start shooting those people, right? But it took 7 or 8 hours. This was clear fraud, right? This was clearly Zionists killing Jews as a staked goat to clear Gaza so that you can take that gas, Suez Canal, obviously, build the Ben Gurion Canal through Gaza. I mean, these things are normal. This isn't like this happens once every 100 years. This is normal operational mode for the United States does this. I mean, Pearl Harbor was obviously a scapegoat account attack. I was raised thinking, the Japanese, one day we were just kind of, our people were in church, and the next thing you know, it's like, blowing up our aircraft carriers and things like that. And that's not what happened. That's not even close to what happened. That was a scapegoat account attack, which we provoked and tried very hard to get the Japanese to attack us. We tried very, very hard. And then they finally did it in desperation. After we cut off their oil, we cut off their tin and their rubber and other things, and they were strangling to death. And they're like, wow. I mean, they kept trying to make a relationship with the United States and try to work with us. The United States kept turning them down. This was public. None of what I'm saying is hidden. It's hidden like stumbling over gold bricks that you're walking across in the parking lot. Imagine, gold bricks of truth. Imagine you're in a jet black parking lot and there's bricks of gold truth you're just stumbling over to get to the next lie, right? I mean, this stuff is amazingly obvious. You look at the old newspaper articles before Pearl Harbor, and there's headlines with like, Japanese desperate to negotiate. That's an actual headline. Japanese desperate to, they were trying everything they could not to go to war with the United States. But Roosevelt, the bad one, he wanted to go to war with Japan. He was siding up with our enemies, the Chinese. You can't make up this stuff. I mean, this is like out of a bad movie, right? And that's what, if you were to tell our ancestors that one day we're just going to give Panama away for $1, they would have said, I don't know what they would have said. They were pretty smart. They were very smart. I read a lot of their old, let me say something about that. I found a book in Texas last week on the bookshelf of one of my friends here in Texas. It's from, the copyright was 1820. I'm sorry, and it was reissued in 1821. And it's a textbook for, 1920 and 1921. And it's a textbook for American sixth graders, right? So I spent 3 days reading this book. So I put it back on the shelf yesterday. But I spent 3 days reading this book, and I put it on my Substack, I don't know, a couple days ago. And this is a book for sixth graders. So it's 105 years old now, and it's like a university level now, right? I mean, the writing is really great writing. It's incredible drawings, and it's on my Substack. You can see I published maybe 20 pages of it, right? But this is for sixth graders. And it's really, again, it would be like forbidden knowledge today, right? How the United States was formed, and King George III, and all these different dramas, and the stamp tax and the tea issues, and so many different things. Our war with Mexico, and going back earlier, the Roman days. They really started way back then, and we got a lot of our stuff from there. And then the Spanish came over, and they did their quest for gold, and they took Mexico, and yada yada yada. And then basically we ended up in the Revolutionary War, and it goes on and on, the Mexican War, and It goes on, and it's really an incredible book. I mean, I would highly recommend that people spend as much time as they can with these old books because they're written much more clearly and a lot less filtered.
I would say that you have a very good mindset, work ethic, and just it seems like you have a really good kind of daily routine. If you were to be advising a young man who is going out into the world to make a difference and to be excellent, what is your kind of routine? What would you suggest in terms of reading, obviously avoiding drugs, pushing yourself, traveling? You even talk about fasting and things of this sort. What is your kind of way of navigating the world? Because it's very impressive.
Well, we're about to take 4 young men. Doc Pete Chambers is a Green Beret retired doctor friend of mine, and he teaches church here in Texas. So I went to church at 2 of the last 3 weeks with him. And on the first time, there was a young man there. He's 19 years old, and I was talking after church, and I was like, we're do many of your young people drink alcohol or smoke, do any drugs or anything? He said, yeah, like 90%. So I'm talking with this young man. He's 19, and then I said to Doc, wait a minute, this guy's really smart. Why don't we enable him, this young man, with his friends, the clean ones that are working hard to become actual men, and enable them with a podcast. So they have their own podcast, and we'll introduce them so they can get their own interviews and that sort of thing. And we'll take them places because some of the pillars of knowledge that are important are, first of all, reading books, but going places, right? And doing things. You need to actually do, don't read about tennis, go play it, well, you can read about it too, because this is also helpful. But one of the,
How many hours a day do you spend reading?
oh, probably 4 or so. And it sometimes a lot more, sometimes less. I'm trying to, that's a quick, I don't know. If you ask me on a different day, I might say a lot more, or a lot less, because sometimes I'm just like out for months doing, like when I was in the wars, I wasn't reading much, and, but I was in the wars getting another education. And that was years. So during those years in the wars, I actually didn't read very much because I was too focused on combat and that sort of thing. But but before that, I read a lot of books, and after that, I went back to them. Right. So it depends on what phase of life I'm in. But let's say if you're going to go to Panama. So when we talked with this young man, we formulated a plan, and then we just met with 4 young men, and the father of 3 of them, and we're going to take them to Panama in a couple of months, right? And I'm going to take them around the canal. I'm going to take them through the canal on a boat, and I'm going to take them over the canal in a helicopter, and then I'm going to take them down to the Darien and then up to El Salvador. So I'm trying to answer your question about how I would structure, let's say, education. I'm taking liberties and saying education. So one is, the first thing I did was, I said, before I take you down, I need all 4 of you to read a book called The Path Between the Seas. The Path Between the Seas. It's a book about the formation of the Panama Canal, and it covers the history, as I recall, from 1870 to 1914 when the canal was completed, right? And it's an incredible book. So I said, before I take you down there, I want you to read this book so that when we're in Panama, and I'm like, this is the place you read about. This is the hill, Ancon Hill, blah, 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 all these different things. And when I take you, through the canal, and you're talking with all these people that work here, like the canal pilots, and you're talking with the real Panamanians who are operating this thing, you have some feet under you got your feet under you. Now we're working on your legs, right? Now we're going to get you through the canal, over the canal, down to the Darien. And before it's over, they're going to know more about Panama than almost any talking head you see on TV, right? And I can do that in just like a couple of weeks. Read the book. I'm going to take you around. I'm going to show you everything, and you're going to get out in it. You know what I mean? And suddenly you're going to start watching the mainstream media and going, wow, I've only focused my energies on reading one book and a couple of weeks running around the canal and flying over it. And suddenly I can tell the news, they don't know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? They don't know anything about what they're talking about. So, but a key thing is, like Masako Ganaha, I took her to 30 countries. She's a very influential writer in Japan. And I took her in the last about 4 years. I took her to Colombia. I took her to 30 countries. I mean, and I told her, I said, I'm taking you to like war college here. And this is worth, I don't know how much it's worth. It's probably worth $1 million, the education you're getting, because you're going to be meeting people in all these countries, key people. So get with key people, read key books, go to key places, and do things like physically do things like Matt Smith. He's got a great blog down in Uruguay. His son, Max, he's not even going to waste time going to university. He's been doing firefighting, paramedic stuff. I think now he's learned how to sail and be a pilot, all this stuff. And the thing is he's building this stack of skills. Another part of learning I found is to go for long walks, right? And because there's periods of time where you need to be quiet. And I mean, no headphones, no music and any of that stuff, right? And just go walking. Like I spent about a year walking around Nepal. Like I walked to Mount Everest a couple times, just the bottom, not to the top. I did Annapurna 3.5, 4 times. I did the whole thing three full times, and big parts of the Annapurna, for those who've been there, you know what I'm talking about. It's a great walk. And so you just get out there and walk, and walk for a month, walk for a week, or however much time you've got, but just be quiet and not talking with anybody. You can talk with them, you can walk with them, but a lot of the walk needs to be just you and the sunshine and the winds and the clouds and just enjoying the birds and just be quiet. Because there's all this knowledge in your head, like all these books I've read, which is a lot, and all the years I spent in wars and all these different things and with world leaders and all these things. But sometimes you just need to go sit down and be quiet, because you have to rearrange all these. You have to look at all these things that you've learned and then let them assemble and work on assembling them, right? And that takes quiet and walking in the sunshine and that sort of thing. So, because everybody listening to this knows a lot of stuff, but most people don't have, or let's say they don't take the time to just go walk and be quiet. Just go sit somewhere. If you can't walk or something, just go sit and be quiet. And don't talk. Don't listen to any music, and just don't even read a book. Just be quiet and think, and you'll start to arrange. You'll start to make. Everybody has huge closets full of information that they haven't had time to sort out. It's like a sorting period. So I tell these young people to, don't be afraid of being quiet. Be afraid of not getting any quiet. Not really be afraid, but you know what I'm saying? I'm not teaching people to be afraid, but what I'm saying is, you understand what I'm saying. Don't be afraid of quiet. Quiet is something you should embrace. Quiet is something like nice, clean mountain water to drink. It's like magic.
Well, I think we'll wind it down here, Michael, and we'll have your links for Substack. You're on Twitter. You've given all sorts of interviews on any number of occasions. Any final thoughts for us, Michael?
Well, all of our family trees have been through a lot of things. Everybody listening to this, your families have been through wars and famines and pandemics. Everybody. And there is no exception to that. We are the children of survivors. And so you've got, whoever you are, you've got the resiliency already in you. So always work on your resiliency and make it better. But we wouldn't even be alive if we didn't come from very strong family trees. And so think about that every day when you wake up.
Hey, thanks for listening. I could really use your help real quick. If you could share this episode with someone, engage with me, leave a review anywhere. This helps me to break the technocratic shadow banning that is happening with my brand. And of course, if you really want to escape the technocracy, go to escapethetechnocracy.com. Privacy tutorial series, books, newsletters, consulting, and of course, you can leave a donation. Thank you very much.